Mr. Speaker. I will be sharing my time today, Mr. Speaker, with the honourable member from Mégantic-L'Érable.
Merci.
Merci. Mr. Speaker, it is always such an honour to rise in the House of Commons to represent my constituents of Peterborough-Kawartha. And today we have put forth an opposition motion. And for those people who are watching at home or starting to get interested in politics, opposition motions are so important because every day the Liberals get to decide what's important, and we know that they are not choosing what is really important to Canadians. And so as an opposition motion, the Conservatives can use our voice to speak for Canadians. So I'll read our opposition motion that we have put forth today. We will have a vote after this, and we are asking the Liberals, NDP and Bloc to support us on this motion to pass. That given that, 1, the cost of government is driving up the cost of living. 2, the Parliamentary Budget Officer states that 40% of new spending is not related to COVID-19. 3, Canadians are now paying higher prices and higher interest rates as a result. 4, it is more important than ever for the government to respect taxpayer dollars and eliminate wasteful spending. The House call on the Auditor General to conduct a performance audit, including the payments, contracts, and subcontracts for all aspects of the ArriveCAN App, and to prioritize this investigation. Mr. Speaker, this is a very important motion because today in the House what we've heard, and I heard members from the Liberal side of the House say, this motion is too broad and it deals too much with the cost of living. Mr. Speaker, when the government in charge, who is the Liberals, who are responsible for spending Canadian taxpayers' money, is wasting their money, when we are in a cost of living crisis, it absolutely is pertinent to this motion. The ArriveCAN app cost $54 million, and we don't know where that money was spent because it was only supposed to cost $250,000. Canadian taxpayers deserve to know. So this motion is extremely important as we look at the complex issue of the cost of living crisis. If you have people who can't afford to buy bread, if you have people who can't afford to buy eggs, and the government is wasting money, and that's really what this comes down to. It comes down to a mismanagement of funds, possibly corruption, but we don't know, so that's why we're calling on this government, because if we don't have accountability, how do we get to the bottom? If we don't ask the right questions, we can't get the right answers. And Canadians do not have trust anymore, Mr. Speaker. We need trust restored so that we can help the people. 1.5 million Canadians used a food bank in March. That is the highest number ever recorded in Canadian history. In 1 month, 1.5 million people accessed a food bank. 1 in 3 of those were children. This past weekend, I went to the grocery store and I had to go get some essentials. And like everyone else, I noticed, the outrageous cost of food. And the teller, the cashier, said to me, she has at least 3 people a day telling her that they're going to have to use a food bank. We live in a G7 country. Now, Mr. Speaker, I like to think that everyone in this House cares. I do. I actually really think that everyone is here because they want to serve, and that's why they took this job. But some days it's hard to believe that. It's hard because the wasteful spending and the unacknowledgement of an app, just admit it didn't work. Just admit that it was a waste and we need to fix it. Let the Auditor General do it, learn from it, move on. Restore trust, Mr. Speaker. The app in itself, for those of you who know, I was former shadow minister or critic to tourism. I took so many calls about this app. I have one constituent who was featured on Global National. Her name is Katie. Now, Katie works in the States, but she is a Canadian citizen. Katie went across the border, and I'm going to grab some of these stats to show you what happened to Katie. Her story was featured on Global National with the ArriveCAN app. She was one of the 10,000 people who were impacted by the glitch of the app, but no communication was ever given to Katie. None. Another just epic fail on the accountability of the Liberals. She was told that she was going to have fines up to $1 million. Now, she wasn't just getting an email, Mr. Speaker. She was getting literally accosted, threatening messages every single day. The mental damage on Katie's life is, I don't know how you measure that in an amount. She was threatened that she would be imprisoned up to 3 years. She was threatened that she would have to be admitted into a federal quarantine facility. And the worst part, Mr. Speaker, she was threatened that she would never be allowed back into her own country. There is so much wrong with this app. Then, in August, instead of admitting that this app was causing so much damage, because the Conservatives kept telling, and we felt like parrots in here. We just kept saying, this is not working. It's not doing whatever it is you think it's supposed to do. The backlogs at Borders, the backlogs at Pearson, we established this reputation where people had zero travel confidence to come to Canada because of the ArriveCAN app. I traveled from Germany, Mr. Speaker, in March, I believe it was, and the anger from the people on the airline of how poorly run Canada was embarrassing. And they said, this ArriveCAN app is disgusting. We cannot even begin to calculate the lost revenue that this faulty app created. We actually don't even have, I don't know what tools we would use to calculate this. The tourism industry before COVID was a $105 billion industry. It's only up to 80 at this point, right? So we have lost so much money because of this app. And you know, I have the member opposite who loves to heckle me right here from Kingston, and he's come in to distract me. And I'll say it, and I've said it before. If you don't want to listen to me, leave.
The point of order from the honourable member for Kingston Islands.
I sincerely apologize to the member if she thought I was heckling her, but I was actually talking to my colleague, and obviously I was talking too loud, and I'll try to keep it down, but I certainly wasn't directing anything at her.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate it. And I'm also going to remind the member not to speak directly to members as they're in the House. So the honourable member for Peterborough Kawartha.
I appreciate that. His record in the past has not been so kind, so I appreciate it. So, Mr. Speaker, I would say that the magnitude of the fault of this app extends so big. When we think about a little convenience store that benefits from somebody crossing the border to come visit their parents, that benefits from tourism, how do we calculate that? And they didn't get to cross the border because the Liberals doubled down in August and they made it only digital. So seniors or somebody who didn't have a smartphone, somebody who didn't want to download the app, couldn't use it. If that's not discriminatory, I don't know what it is. I don't know how many seniors came into my constituency office and said, Michelle, I don't know how to use this, please help me. And then when we would do it, it would work. And you'll hear the Liberals say that it worked fine, and I'm sure it worked fine sometimes. But that's not good enough when you have a whole industry at stake. That's not good enough when you are supposed to be helping Canadians restore travel confidence. That's not good enough when people are wrongfully fined and quarantined, 10,000 people. How much time do I have left, Mr. Speaker? 1 minute. Thank you so much. So I would call to the House that I think that this is absolutely an important motion that we should all be open to, because why are we elected? To serve our constituents, to serve Canadians. Why are we elected? To be accountable. And if there is a $54 million app that this government doesn't know how it was paid for, then we owe it to Canadians to find out why. So, again, Mr. Speaker, please let us get the Auditor General to conduct an audit, including the payments, contracts, and subcontracts for all aspects of the ArriveCAN app, and to prioritize this investigation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I've been trying to just clarify something with respect to this motion, because I've been getting different and conflicting answers from Conservatives and NDP today. But the very first clause in this, the first whereas clause, says the cost of government is driving up the cost of living. And what we heard the member from the leader of the opposition say today is that he was referring to the fact that there are more public servants, more public sector jobs now than there were before the pandemic, and essentially criticizing those public sector jobs. Now, the NDP seems to claim that it has to do with subsidizing oil. That's what the member from Courtenay Alberni said. So I'm wondering if this member can clarify for me on clause 1 of this motion, where it says the cost of government is driving up the cost of living. Is that indeed talking about the fact that there are more public sector jobs now than there were prior to the pandemic?
The honourable member for Peterborough Kawartha.
Thank you to my colleague across the way for the question. I think what we need to focus on too is when we look at food bank users and that stat that I referred to in my speech, the 1.5 million in 1 month, so highest ever recorded, it was also in conjunction at the same time with the highest employment rate. So people are working and they still can't afford food. And this government continues to waste money over and over again on programs that don't work, that don't get to the people who need it, that are constantly met with red tape. So unless we do these audits and we hold them to account, why are we letting them just waste taxpayers' money?
Question et commentaire. L'honorable.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Drummond. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I heard my colleague during her speech, and she said that we've lost so much money with that money, $54 million. I agree. For an app that lasted perhaps 2.5 or 3 years, it's too much money. That money could have been spent elsewhere. Last week, the Bloc Québécois tabled a motion that talked about spending of $70 million year after year after year after year. And we were criticized because our priorities being put in the right place. So I don't have a question. I just wanted to make that comment, and I'd like to hear hers. Thank you.
The commentaire. The honourable member for Peterborough Kawartha.
Thank you to my colleague. And to his point, $54 million may seem small when you talk about $1 trillion debt. Like, the comprehension level of the money that is owed in this country is not really conceivable to the average Canadian. And it didn't even work. And we can't even calculate the amount of money that was lost because of its ineffectiveness. And so if we are not challenging this government, if they are not stepping up, they should be offering to do this audit. We shouldn't have to call on them to do this audit. That is the right thing to do. So if they are mismanaging Canadian taxpayers' money, they ought to be ready to take a stand on that.
Questions et commentaires, questions and comments, and I want to make sure I get the name of the writing correctly. The honourable member for Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for her excellent speech. One of the things that's been on my mind is, whether any other countries around the world have something like the ArriveCAN app. So I checked, at least among our peers in the G20, not a single one has an app like this. Not Germany, South Korea, India, the UK, South Africa, Japan. I won't name them all, but there's 20 of them, except for Canada. We have this app that costs $54 million, an app that Canadians didn't need and can't afford. And I'm wondering if my honourable colleague could comment on the fact that we spent $54 million on something that was apparently not necessary in the eyes of our G20 peers.
The honourable member for Peterborough Kawartha.
Thank you to my honourable member for the great question. And the question is exactly what we need to be asking. Why? Why does this Liberal government continue to say, we're going to do this and we're going to make things better? And every time, consecutively, since this Prime Minister has taken office, things have gotten worse. So it's a great question.
Reprise du débat.
Resuming debate.